um, address that as you proceed on. Um, so I think one of the things that I read through your work, so I just posted at some point. I basically stopped trying to disaggregate or post particulate uh, comments, and I just decided it's probably just all right. So I just at some point I just started posting the same thing. So I mean I read I would read through and okay, I can see what you're trying to do. Some people didn't have a plan. Quite a few of us had objectives, which is good. Perhaps maybe that's a place to begin. And I think the question I asked is, have you thought through what problem you're seeking? The exercise that you're taking part in is seeking to address. And I was remembering what we had said earlier on, that policy analysis is a process of identifying potential policy options that could address your problem, and then comparing those options to choose the most effective, efficient, and feasible. Okay. Um, so wengine wanakuta wamechelewa and they don't want to be late in. So yeah, it's on that basis I was raising an issue. What is a problem the policy was to seek to address? Okay. Then of course, because like we said that you have to choose a policy option that may be the best for your situation. So what is your situation? What problem are you seeking to address? So that's fundamental. And I think I went ahead and said, okay, what are the outcomes that your policy seeks to enable? Okay, so, and the reason I raised that was because if you move back a few steps and look at the whole organizational management continuum, and you think through part of the management, they'll talk about strategic management, they'll talk about then you talk about, of course, once the strategy is being operationalized, then you will talk about operational management. And so policy is part of the operational management because it talks about guidelines and best practices, practices, procedures, processes, guidelines on how the organization runs, or for that matter, even a country, maybe in a sector that it runs. Okay, so it's an operational guideline, or it's an operational best practice. It may even speak to processes and procedures. It may speak to processes, procedures, some outputs that it may speak to things like quality and many other things. Okay, inputs, deliverables, like the way the process takes place. Okay, but normally, organizations exist hopefully for a purpose. I think we all know the story, and you probably are better placed because you've gone through, I think, two different units of management, and I think you did organizational management, organizations and management in your third year of study. And I think at some point, I can't remember the new curriculum, but I think there was a unit around information systems, strategic management and implementation. I know we've reviewed the curriculum like twice, so I'm trying to remember what is the latest, but I know at some point, I think that is something that we do. So it is on that basis I was asking that question, because as I read your work, you're clear this is what you want to do. There's of course the review, there is the bit of reading, the reviewing what's there, and then of course engaging different stakeholders. But I think I was raising a more fundamental question. Okay, that's all right. That's clearly the process. But what is the end goal? In other words, if your policy was going to be implemented, what is the end goal? Because there's a way in which you have a strategic plan, for instance, and then you have strategies, and then you have okay, the way it is for instance, you have a strategic plan, and then you have, or maybe that's a conversation we should have, eh? Because I think that's basically the issue I was raising. And in fact, last time, that's the reason why, though we were talking about policy and policy analysis, we took a bit of time to think, what is strategic management and what does it entail? What does it involve? And so that we can then situate the policy, in this case, different policies that you're looking at within that environment, okay? So that we can actually say, okay, where does policy fit in that process, okay? So that's basically what we were trying to do, and that's why I raised the issue of strategy, cognizant of the fact that you already have gone through that at some point in your journey, okay? So maybe someone needs to remind us as we, again, I won't keep you for long, but I think this is important so that you can then go continue working on what you're working. But maybe someone needs to remind us, in the larger scheme of things, in terms of how organizations run, and in terms of strategy, in terms of policy, in terms of operations, where does policy fit in within that process? Okay, because policies are kind of operational, right? They maybe that's what I should ask directly. If you think about strategy, you think about operations of an organization, resource allocation, the different things that we do. I guess there's planning, there is direction, there is, resource allocation, there is, there's all kind of things leading, all these different things. So where does policy fit in within that process? Where does policy fit in within that process? And because you're talking about it being an instrument of realizing something. So where does policy fit in that organizational management strata, as it were? Someone? is it possible to position it within that? Okay, that whole management, organizational management aspect. Okay, what does it seek to do? Why do we bother with policy analysis and come up with policies and then implement those policies and then kind of like routinize them so that they become the glue that holds us together. It starts speaking into our practices and processes and procedures. Okay, so why does policy fit in within the larger scheme of things as far as you're managing organizations? Yes, Craig.
Yeah, so for me, I can say we can say all levels of management, then they come in different parts. Like for the operations, if you're talking about policy implementation, like this will be the people who are actually on the ground doing the actual work. So like the strategy and the tactical people are going to listen to the operations so that they create the policy. Then the strategy and the tactical people are going to now make the big decisions. But at the end of the day, even if you make a big decision, someone still needs to come and do the actual work. So for me, I can just say all of them, all levels of management, and then now like for this the policy implementation, policy development, now that goes to like different levels of management.
Okay, thank you, Craig. So if we were allowed to think of it like hierarchically, or if you were to think maybe in terms of sequence or what comes first, maybe a chicken and egg situation. What comes first, strategy or policy?
For me, I can say strategy. Like strategy is just the belief, and then now trying to document that belief and put structure onto it. Is when you now bring the policy after.
Okay, policy. Okay, strategy comes first. Okay, is that a consensus, or are there people who feel differently? Yes, Hansel. Okay, yes, Hansel says I'll say the strategy comes first. Okay. Yes, Craig, just go on.
Yeah, I have something to add. I think it depends on like how deep someone is, like in terms of like market. Like let's say for example, like the telecommunications and the internet.
Mm,
So like when the internet was starting, like these guys are just scientists. So they went for
mm,
strategy first. It was like they were trying to invent. Then with how they played around, then they saw we need to standardize some things, isn't they made a policy. And now for
mm,
future market, for the future business people, they'll
mm.
come and they might use policy first on some things.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to wonder whether there is any other take on this. Yes, Gloria.
Okay. Based on what I've seen, I think I've seen policy being drafted first and strategy after. I'm not so sure why, because I also had questions about it. Yeah, but that's what I've seen. It's the policy that comes first and the strategy.
Okay, I think Gloria is saying there are times that policy comes first. Um, Okay. I'm trying to look at something here. Okay, so let's just go on. Okay. Craig has raised a hand. Go on, Craig.
Yeah, I have a question. Is there an official answer to this question? Because actually, what is it?
Official. Sounds very formal and I guess you're trying to be polite or euphemistic. Is there a correct and a wrong answer to this question?
Yeah.
Um, okay. Yeah, I was okay. I confess what I was trying to do. So I know we've revealed the curriculum quite a few times. We actually used to have a module called Information Systems Strategy, Formulation and Implementation, which Professor Aima used to facilitate. And now I see there is information systems and organizations. I can't quite remember what was the content of that. The reason is I don't want to assume things and just say, come on, you guys know this. So that's why I'm going a little slowly to just persuade myself that perhaps, or maybe I made that assumption. Sometimes we change things, but I'll address that, Craig, just now. I just don't want to assume, so just allow me one little second. And I'll speak into that. And maybe perhaps that's a more fundamental, but I'm still here. Okay. Let me ask a question. I know that you're still working through this. Who takes you these days? Who's taking in information systems and organizations?
Professor Waima.
Sorry?
Professor Waima.
Professor M, okay. Okay, I've just noticed that IIS strategic management is towards the very end. And of course, we still have many weeks. Maybe you are here to address that. So maybe I assume. But anyway, to answer you directly, Craig, you know, strategy or the strategic plan or strategic management entails us coming up with strategic objectives and strategies that an organization will seek to follow. Okay, so many times you say, okay, here we are today, we are your University of Nairobi, and you know, okay, where are we going? You know, where do we see that? So how come you say people there's a vision for every organization? Say, okay, the next 10 years, the next 20 years, this is where we want to be. But if you're here and we're going there, how do we get there? So we must have a plan to get there. And that plan ultimately has to be detailed enough to get us there. And so they'll get a team together, you know, and they will look at what is existing. They will talk to many people, and then they will seek to identify what are the major issues that affect the organization. You know, what are the things that we need to address? What are the most critical issues that define us, and how do we go about it? You know, so we say, okay, for instance, what do? Let's look at who we are. Let's look at our core competencies. Let's look at what are our strengths? What do we do? And what do we do best? What are our strengths? Then let's look at what are our opportunities, because most organizations exist to be able to provide a service or a product. What are our opportunities? And how do we then utilize our strengths to be able to as it were, utilize those opportunities to be able to do what we want to do? Then, but we say, okay, but in that process, you got to be careful because there are sharks out there. Lakini jamani, why are we coming late? Huh? And then you don't, please just choose your UON, whatever. So your device is connect to UON, so you don't have to do this. Anyway, so we then say, okay, what are the main issues here? But we need to be careful because there's competition. There are competition out there. And of course, there are existing products and services that are competing against us. So we can't just assume. So we call those threats, right? So we need to be able to make sure that we can defend ourselves against those threats. Otherwise, shortly we shall be out of business, right? And then we say, but gotta be careful what are our weaknesses, because those outside threats can actually utilize our weaknesses to be able to take us out. So we look at all that organizational environment within and without, then identify what are the main issues. For instance, for you, when you say, okay, listen, we exist to be able to come up to generate new knowledge, okay, and then utilize that knowledge, one, to be able to train the next to enable the learning of the next generation of leaders, okay, and professionals, and knowledge workers and researchers and academics. So, teaching and learning. So you enable that learning. But we're not just there. We're doing research, trying to come up with new knowledge so we can. So we'll be able to therefore say that research is a core issue for university. Okay, then we say, wait, but we engage in teaching, there's learning, there's teaching, there is training. Okay, so for instance, say, look at, we need, teaching and learning is a major issue of the university. So you gotta make sure that we deliver the learning process in a way that students will be able to learn in the most efficient, effective way possible. Will enable that. So you think about the way we teach, the way we enable learning, the delivery, the equipment, the infrastructure, the way we just carry out the whole process. Okay, then we then say, are there some methods of delivery that are better than others? Are there some strategies or methods of delivery of learning, we call them pedagogies, that are better than others, for instance? So is it possible to be able to utilize that? What about platforms? So we look at those. So you look at a few other things and you say, we think that for a university to survive, it would be nice if we utilized part of what we're doing to enable our survival. In other words, to make us sustainable. And every so often, depending on who is on the hill and who are in the august house, they keep saying, resources are less and less and less. And therefore, we need to divide these resources. And they say, the education system is consuming lots and lots of resources. It's not sustainable. Okay, and the more and more people to learn. So in that case, institutions of higher learning and universities will just give you so much. Okay, for instance, the learning model right now, if you think about it very seriously, it says, okay, who is taking computer science? How much do you need to deliver computer science? In terms of the training, in terms of the labs, in terms of the different things that you need to do. And it said, this is how much it costs for one student to be able to get through. So the government comes and says, okay, so so it costs maybe what, 300,000 or maybe 400,000 a year to be able to deliver this. Okay, and so we say every student is going to pay that. All right, and then later, then they say, okay, there's a model which they came up with. But think about it. Wait a minute. What are we talking about? So it's to enable learning. What about the infrastructure for learning? What about the buildings that exist? What about maintenance? What about power? What about water? If we think about that, okay, maybe we did. All right. So, what about the very purpose for our being, generating new knowledge? In that model where we decided with students, you get so much money, and part of it is going to be paid by the government, the other one is going to be a loan, the other one is going to be by the guardian. Did we factor in the fact that university has to do research? And that's a core, apart from teaching and learning. So if you go to the details, you realize that's not there. So universities are not just teaching institutions. Research is very, very core. Okay. So where does that lead? So the universities are like, wait, these resources that are being given are not even enough. And you probably know there's a scandal brewing where, for instance, they decide some you earn so much, but we've got to make sure that we cut this amount to take it to the tax man. Okay, but that money doesn't exist. All right. So I'm paid what they take away from your pension. Okay, they take away for your pay as you earn, but the taxman on the other side sometimes doesn't get anything. Sometimes scandalously and illegally, my pension people don't get my money. That's actually illegal. But you see, how can you do a weird thing like that? Because the money is not enough. I'm trying to make a case here. I'm coming back to answer your question. So the investors are like, no, we must be able to produce, to generate income, but we're not in business. So how about utilizing the assets that we have to be able to do that? You see, but we do research, all right? But this research that we're doing, is it possible? Sometime we come up with inventions or latest cutting edge research. Is it possible, therefore, to utilize it to be able to get some income out of it? So you think this is the research I've done, for your project, this PhD student, this master student, after their thesis, this looks like it has commercial value because it can produce the service or a product. We need to commercialize this research or commercialize this project, right? So we say there's commercialization of research. So we have to come up with IP. Okay. So we register patents, we register copyright, we register all kinds of things and say we need to. And we go to industry and say we don't want to do this. Can we get a pharmaceutical company that is willing to take this invention, this vaccine, and actually commercialize it? So tell, okay, give us the license. We will commercialize it. Now, for everything sold, you will get 10%. They say, okay, you researcher, you get so much, your supervisor gets so much, the university gets so much, okay? Or we decide, no. We this is cutting edge project. It needs to be commercialized. We know we mentor you a little bit, and then we connect you. We get funders, and then make sure that you come out to a place where it's actually you're providing a service and a product, and you actually have clients. Then we get people to begin funding. So you're talking about startup. So that process, because then we know the university can be able to generate income to be able to run, right? So I'm trying to make a case for a third strategic issue. That's, if you want to call it innovation and commercialization, okay? Or just call it commercialization, or maybe just call it innovation. So I'll call it innovation and entrepreneurship. Okay, so that's another major, that's another strategic issue. So now we talk about teaching and learning, we talk about research and knowledge creation, or we talk about innovation and entrepreneurship. And there are many, a number of other things. So you say, okay, let's take one, research. What do we want to do? So we break down, so that becomes a strategic issue. I've mentioned 3 strategic issues, and we break that strategic issues. We then break it down into strategic objectives. So what do we need to do? They say, what do we mean by research knowledge creation? We want to make sure that in every year we're producing maybe 1,000 journal articles. And then we want to make sure that we're presenting it to the top journals in the world. We want to make sure that, then we want to make sure that we actually can fund this research. We want to make sure. So out of all that, we say, what are the objectives to be able to ensure that we are meeting this this research objective? So we come up with strategic objectives, and then for each of those objectives, we come up with a strategy. This is how we're going to do it. For instance, if we say we're going to make sure that we fund research in terms of if, for instance, someone needs to go collect data. For instance, if someone needs a specialized lab, we shall provide that. You need for instance, if we say you need to go and collect data, if, for instance, we say you need to go to a conference, we will fund that. So that's maybe there's a funding aspect to research. So what strategy are we going to put in place to be able to do that? So you do that. And so for each of the strategic issues, you come up with strategic objectives, then you come up with strategies. But then you say, we're going to be able to say, fund research, or we're going to make sure we'll fund you going to conferences. We'll fund you going to collect data and to analyze it. We'll fund you getting research assistance. So good things to say, but wait, how do we do that? So how do you operationalize that? In fact, we go ahead and say, how are we going to monitor it? What are the indicators of that? How are you going to monitor it? But once we do that, we put it in place, and we even say we're going to get funding, all that. But wait, how do we make sure that this is done, and done in a way that is standard, is quality, that kind of thing? So basically, I'm trying to make a statement. Once you do a strategic plan, then you come up with strategic objectives, you come up with strategies. They have to be operationalized. We're funding research, okay? We are connecting you to research organizations. We're getting industry supervisors for research. So we need to, how do we do that? This is where policy comes in, okay? So we say, this is a process we have to go through. These are the process you have to go through. These are the procedure. These are the practices, best practices. This is how you make sure you do things. For instance, in the University of Nairobi, there's a policy on how you pay your school fees. There's a policy on how you take your examinations. There's a policy, there are many, many policies. There's a research policy. Today, there's an IP policy. So it's how do we do this? It's an operationalization, all right? But why do we have these policies? It's because they are operationalizing our strategies, okay, that are trying to meet strategic objectives so that we can then be able to have this plan, so we can deliver who we are as an organization, okay? I hope you get it. All right, so once we have strategy, the strategic plan, it has strategic objects, strategic issues, strategic objectives, and then strategies. Then these strategies are now what we're going to be doing, say for the next 1-2 years. So we break it down in the next 2 years. They then say, how do we know what we want? For instance, they say we want to be able to produce every researcher must produce 2 research conference papers, and we must produce 1 journal paper every year. But how do we do that? We must make sure there's funding. We must make sure every researcher is supervising 3 PhD students. We must make sure we can sponsor them to conferences. We must make sure 1, 2, 3. We must make sure that he doesn't or she doesn't have so much teaching role that they have no time to be able to. So if that's the case, then we have to make sure we have enough teaching staff. So we say, okay, some of you, when how many units do you need to teach per semester? And that becomes policy. You understand? So yes, I hope that makes it clear, because that's a process. When I was talking to you, I was looking at, that's when I was coming organizations, whatever you call it, that whatever. Then I realized that, yes, you're going to be able to organize information systems in organizations. I realized that the strategic management of information systems is towards the very end. Information system, the strategic resources towards the very end. So probably you're still going to be able to talk about it. But that's the gist of what I was going to say. And that's why last time when we were talking about strategic policy analysis, we started with strategy. So strategy comes first, okay? And even if you find an organization that doesn't have strategy, that has policies, then we have an issue. Where are you going? Even if you don't have a formal strategy or strategic plan, you have a plan in your head on some pieces of paper, because you're here today. In 3 years' time, you're thinking, we need to have increased our income to this. We need to we need to have doubled our customers, right? We need to make sure that now we have 5% of the market. We are setting our platforms. We need to make sure that we have expanded to 3 African countries. These are strategies. I mean, no, these are goals. How do you get those goals? There must be strategies. So you must have a strategy, even if you're a startup. I want to make sure that within the next 3 years, okay, this is where I am, and I want to scale. Now I have, 5,000 clients. By next year, I want to have 20,000 clients. How do you do that? So you must have a strategy on how to do that. And you have to break them down into plans. But once you have that, then there's what we do every day to meet that, okay? So that's basically the understanding, and I pray that that clarifies it. But I realize, okay, maybe, it's still going to cover it later, so I needed to speak it. So the main thing I'm trying to say is this: a strategy doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not there for the sake of it. It's to realize something. At the very highest level, you need to ask yourself, what problem are you trying to solve? For instance, if the information systems policy or the ICT policy for the country, what are the goals of that? It's not just to lay out fiber optic cables all over the place. Okay, it's not to say that the last mile connectivity to communities from the sub county to make sure we go to every ward. So what? That's a means to an end. What is the end we are seeking to, be able to address? For instance, check this out. Say if the government says that, every ward, where we have the MCAs, there must be, I think that's where the government is going, there must be some kind of digital innovation space. Why do you want to do that? Why have we rolled out the national fiber backbone, reaching every sub-county, I think it is right now? We've spent lots of resources in that. Why? Why are you setting up these innovation and digital innovation hubs in every ward? Why? Or sub-county? Why? So there's a strategy that the government has. Maybe for them, they say, okay, we do that, then the people at the sub-county of the world shall be able to get access to the space. And then they can do what? I don't know. Maybe they can engage in e-commerce. Maybe they can go there to learn coding. Maybe they can be able to go there and access the infrastructure to be able to do some, online jobs. I don't know. Whatever it is, there must be strategy. So that's the main thing I'm asking you. So if it's an ICT policy for a country, what does that country seek to achieve? If, for instance, you're talking about the ICT, the health, the health information system for health, or ICT or health ICT policy, what is it seeking to achieve? Why is it there? What is the outcome? Why is it taking us? So what is it answering to? Is there some strategy in that space, on health? All right, and now the utilization of health to be able to do what? Utilization of ICTs in health. Is there is there a strategy? Okay, if for instance it's one on AI, for instance, why AI? Why an AI policy? What do you want to use it for? Okay, we have all these the capability, the potential of AI today as we speak, because of the very essence of AI and how it's made, and and the potential and the technologies and what it can enable. Yes, it's an enabler. But for us, if you're going to have an AI policy, what do we want it to enable? But you must be careful when you're answering that question, because it's not just enabling something in a vacuum. It is for us. It is for the country. It is for the people. If we lose that, then we lose it completely. So what is it delivering for Wanjiko? Okay, then, put it up there so that we can actually begin to see it. So what kind of enablers is it rolling out? And in what sectors? How? Ultimately, they must be, okay? So if, say, we're talking about, the policy on crypto, okay, not crypto, perhaps, yeah, maybe it's on a blockchain, for instance. Why? Why do we need something on blockchain? Please. So we must relate it to the larger thing, okay? And we must think about the country. We must think about the people. We must think about an end, an outcome, okay? And probably there are already strategies in the country concerning this. So what is the policy seeking to be able to do, okay? So I think that's what I want to say, but I'm trying to speak into something larger. The topics we've been going through, I hope you can begin to see how they relate to what you're doing. Okay, for instance, one of the last things we talked about is ICT for development, and we talk about development. And we raised something, and in fact, I think I mentioned this. Maybe I should mention it again. I know that we introduced it. We talked about it a little bit. We talked about the capability approach or development as freedom, and then I see there's lots of resources concerning that. And then I say there's some papers I was recommending that you look at, and they're readable. They're not esoteric, like tough, they're things that you can actually read within a sitting, okay? Maybe you need some 30 minutes to quickly go through. And maybe there's a way as a team you can be able to say, okay, you read this, come and share with us that. You read this, come and share with us. You read this, whatever, discuss it. So there's a reason I'm talking about this. So I want to just look at what's there so that I just tell you something that I think you could look at. So we have many papers in there. And so, for instance, there's some two researchers. I'm talking about the classroom. There's one called Klein who asked ICT for what? Okay. And the next one next to ICT for what? ICT for what is a framework by someone called Klein. Then there's one called Capability Approach and E-Development. And that is basically utilizing that approach for development. And that lady is called Zheng, Z-H-E-N-G, okay? And then there's some guy called Hicks, ICT for D 3.0, okay? There's even ICT for D 2.0 there. So, for instance, we're talking about, improving the well-being of the community, of the Kenyans, of the people, okay? You need to take them to, so ICT, right, you remember for way back when we started, it's actually an enabler. That's what it is, okay? We look at different ways of thinking about it in a more nuanced way. It's an enabler, okay? It's an enabler of something. So as you're thinking about these different things you're doing, go back and ask yourselves, what is it enabling? And is there a strategy that exists? Okay, think for instance about the ICT master plan. Now I can begin to speak into that. Or think about the health strategy for health in our country. Okay, then go grab and say, what has government said concerning how we can actually utilize ICT to deliver health, right, in outcomes, to be able to and to be able to help healthcare delivery. So come down then and say, okay, what policies do you need? But you're not starting from coming up with a policy for what. Okay, so that's basically my issue. So once you clarify that, and that means a bit of reading, a bit of looking around, then you can then say, okay, let's begin, then let's read around that space, what exists and stuff like that. And then we need to, I think, parts of policy analysis, engaging with people from industry or the practitioners, stakeholders, actors. The question is, you identify who those people are, and have you who of course are going to be quite a few. You have to sample a few. Okay, you have to talk to some. Okay, so have you thought about it? For instance, I'll give you, for instance, ICT master plan. Okay, wait. So for people dealing with the ICT policy for our country, I'm just giving us a bit of leakage. I'm trying to see. Okay, so for those people dealing with, just a minute, let me just, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Yeah. Okay. So for people dealing with that, and you are thinking, who are we going to talk to? One of your professors has been the main architect of the ICT master plan for the last number of few years, the last 3 or so. I don't know whether he did the last one, but the 2 before that, I think he did it. So you may not have to go far. I'm talking about Professor Emma. And in fact, right now he has had a task force which is trying to look at the different laws that pertain to ICTs and basically come up with one all-encompassing law that addresses all these different things. And so he's thoroughly well acquainted to that. So yes, I'm trying to look at the national ICT policy. Okay, let me see. The National Information Society policy. As if for instance you're dealing with that. So I mean, there you are. Okay, I mean that would be a pretty very important resource to talk to. Okay, once you establish what you want to engage him on, and perhaps for those ones, it's possible for him to be able to connect you. And the thing is, he's very well connected, very experienced, very respected. So he's able to actually call somebody, 2-3 people, and because of who he is and how they work together, they would actually be able to sit and listen to you. And in fact, if you think about there are a few other places. So that you identify a few people that can connect you up. Okay, so that's what's basically what I was trying to say. If you can pretty stuck, then probably get back to me and try and see whether we can connect you to 1 or 2 people. Perhaps through them, then you'll be able to, talk to 1 or 2 other people. And we're not asking that you talk to 20 people or 10 people. You just want to identify a small sample that you can actually engage to address some of the things that you have studied and you think they need to be spoken into. That was basically what I was trying to say. So those are my comments after looking at what you've written, and yeah, so those are the two questions I asked, and that's what I was coming to. What problem does your policy seek to address? And then ultimately, therefore, so it's not just starting from the blue, okay? It's informed by something, and secondly, is to ask, okay, you know, part of my policy analysis, once I've read around it and established some of the main issues, I need to be able to engage. Who am I going to engage to? And how do I start connecting with them? That's basically what was, I thought that was what I thought was important. And therefore, you think about some of the topics you looked at, you realize, oops, okay, they are not, what can we, as you think what we just talked about today, there'll be some implications for some of the things that we've talked about. So what can we be able to look back so that this policy analysis process and coming up with one is not divorced from what we've been looking at in class. I think that's what I want to point out. So I want to finish there. And then unless you have questions or some clarifications, then I can allow you to meet on your own and continue discussion and continue the work. Any questions or clarifications or comments? If you don't have, I'll allow you to go and work on your own. Then let's plan to meet on Wednesday, and perhaps there'll be questions, there'll be issues, there'll be things that you, in light of what we talked about today, and you've gone to talk as a team. Let's talk and see on Wednesday what are the things that are emerging. What do you want us to talk about? How do you want us to come in to assist or to work with you? What is not clear? That kind of thing. Okay. So those would be my thoughts before I let you go. Okay, I've seen someone agreeing that it's okay.